jerry-rigged something. Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to class number, what is it now? If this is the 6th law of the universe plus our introductory class, this is our 7th class that we've done so far. So each class we have focused on a particular one after we did our little intro class, a particular law of the universe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 today is gender, which gender is really, it's not about the body parts that you have, because everything that we're teaching here is about the mind, okay? So gender isn't something that is only present in physical form. It's present as the basic two energies that are available. We live in this polarized universe that came from nothing, and everything's made of mind. Well, essentially, when the universe, and this is just sort of a visual metaphor, when it stepped out of, like, let's say here I am with my hands closed and I'm in perfect alignment. I'm just a mind, nothing physical, but I'm just sitting here, not moving, not thinking. And my first thought is sort of an intellectual action, right? So let's say when I have this thought to sort of wake up and be like, ooh, something, right? I take myself from this place of balance where I'm over here, and I put myself in this other direction. Because of the nature of polarity and other laws of the universe, I'm out of balance with the one thing. So the only thing to balance me is the opposite of this thing. That plus this would equal my balance. And that is fundamentally what gender is. The universe divides into these two energies, and they're fundamentally a little different, but they both come from the same place, a place of inertia, not inertia, but inertness, sleep, and activity. And then balance of those two things, a little bit of sleep and a little bit of activity, equals these two very particular vibrations. And we're going to talk about gender today in lots of different ways so you can really understand what I mean by all this. But the first thing that we're going to do, as we always do, is go through the 13 universal laws. Now, attraction, I always save for last. This will be the last one that we cover. The whole basis of this class was that my interpretation of this is that our desires with it are very superficial. Ooh, tell me how to get things. And that's great. But it's this functioning within this. So everybody's really like, oh, I want to get in the vibration of the thing, and they don't understand how, we'll talk about at the very end of class, how being out of balance in your gender can stop you from attracting, because attraction is based on inspired action. If you don't have your masculine in the right spot, where you're ready to pounce on your prey, on the thing that you want, well then when the opportunity comes along, you're not going to take the action necessary to get what you want. Or if you're very action-oriented, but you're not being sensitive and open to the possibilities or like what the world is sort of telling you, you might tackle everything to your detriment. End up with way too many things on your plate. End up prioritizing something that you shouldn't have prioritized. If you had a gentler look and engagement with the world, you'd wait for the right thing, and then you'd pounce on it as soon as you saw it. That's the feminine, waiting for the right thing, and the masculine, I'm gonna get it. You have to have both, and we all have both. So gender isn't about, we have ladies here, we have men here, it's not about that. I am a very feminine guy. My feminine energy is very strong. I'm nurturing, I'm very creative, very sensitive, very empathic, a little less so masculine. And as I've struggled with my kind of wounded masculine, I've dealt with very particular masculine sort of things. And meanwhile, I've seen the last girlfriend that I had, she was very wounded feminine. She was masculine, capable of being, I'm capable of being feminine, wounded masculine, she's wounded feminine. And as I was looking at the thing before class today of just like all of them in a row of the wounded feminine, I was just like, oh my God, this is so, this is so my girlfriend. Like she was so wounded feminine, you know, because this is it when you are that thing. And I'm a feminine guy, so I'm always looking for a masculine woman. I like, you know, women who are like afraid of bugs. I want to smack them. You know, I can't stand that stuff. You know, I need a woman to be like together, and I'll be my more relaxed self. But it's funny because sometimes, you know, the thing that happens with all these masculine women, they don't have any sympathy. And I've been dealing with chronic pain for the past 10 years now. So you have women in your life who are masculine because that's what I like, but they're not exactly connected to the part of them that needs to nurture. And then sometimes you end up feeling unwanted because you were, you know, small and you were allowing yourself to be weak and going to them for comfort. They don't like that. You know, it's a different sort of energy. So, and this goes for, you know, I'm kind of abnormal. I think most guys are a little bit more masculine, you know, and their feminine is a little bit more wounded. Just so happens, though, I'm the opposite, and lots of guys are like that as well. And then plenty of women are the opposite of what, you know, most of the women are. And any way you slice it, it's not one thing or the other, it's both. I have both. You know, we're both masculine, we're both feminine. Getting them into balance, taking that, you know, the little meter that says whether it's hot or cold and getting it right to the middle. That's where we're all looking to do. You know, we want to get ourselves to be reactive to the right things. So we got to be sensitive and strong. So we're going to skip around here. I've got them divided into these little groups of threes to make them a little bit easier to understand. Really, my only contribution to this information is my interpretation of it and the way I've ordered the laws. As I was saying about attraction, it's kind of a superficial thing. Really, it's the law of creation, which you'll understand when you understand that you are God. You are the creator of your reality. And everybody else is other aspects of God, and you don't want to hurt them because you're going to pay for that. You're God and they're God. So who's right? You're both right, always. So it doesn't pay to be right, really doesn't. You don't want to walk around going, I'm right. Well, they're right too. Opposition, they're right, you're right. How right? You know, you'll find out on the other side when you see perfect measure of the thing and things that they did to you in previous lives, things that you did to them in previous lives. It's a very complex thing. So who are we to judge? We don't know. So that's why we're supposed to just love everybody and assume the best, which is what I try to do. All right, so law number one. We are one. It's the law of divine oneness. We came from an inert nothing, oblivion, if you will. Oblivion came to life as a mind first, before any physical things. I say this all the time. What came first, the chicken or the egg? The idea for the chicken and the egg. That came first. Idea always comes before form. There's a wonderful book called The Field, which shows various little scientific studies where you see an energetic field around the forming fetus. So the energetic field is actually the thing that's guiding the fetus to grow into the shape and the place that it is. Within the field is the information for what the DNA is supposed to do. So what comes first? The energy comes first. Energy is very important, and in American society, we have not been very good about honoring, you know, what's going on in the East, and we don't acknowledge our energetic bodies at all. You know, we all have auras. I mean, even a rock has an aura because every molecule in it is just sort of, you know, vibrating on a really small level. So everything is coming from this infinite oneness that's been split up into a mind. And the ideas that form our universe, they were sort of made in an instance as this mind booted up and just infinitely thought and figured things out. And then at some point it went, all right, let's make some stuff. And then came all this stuff. First comes the mind. And the mind was able to think of everything before we could. So the interesting thing about these laws as you go, when we get one and the mind, polarity is sort of like because of these two things, we now have this thing. We now have this next law, which is polarity. And so much of this is because of the cause and effect, which we'll get into in a second. But because of the nature of the way the mind just went in this certain order that it could not really avoid, you're going to see from the nothing to an awake something to the polarity. What we have there is black, white, gray, however you want to think of it. What we're going to get into next is the gradients of color. And this pattern is going to repeat itself over and over again. Everything is polarized. The mind of the universe is inherently polarized. So everybody needs to right their mind, realize that they are one with the grasshopper and God, she, herself, his self, whatever, and unpolarize yourself in the physical way that we are here. We're crazy people with our heads, really shoved up our butts because we don't realize that everything is dual. And there is two sides to everything. And if you look long enough at any problem, find out enough about anybody's side, you will find yourself going, oh, I kind of understand that now, because it's just a perspective away. You are always looking at you. And there's plenty of perspectives that we could take on where we could go out into the world and we wouldn't actually see differentiation in the way that we do, where I'm like, okay, you have blonde hair and I would literally just be like, oh, this is me. Because I'm perceiving you as you truly are. You're more me than you are not me. And all of your energy is coming from the exact same place. It's the exact same energy. It's in a different part of the cycle because we are all in a different column or whatever in the long sort of stretch of this one thing, experiencing its mind, experiencing all the great ideas it had. And it's not doing anything over, your experience and your experience are vastly different because the one thing is much more vast than we realize, and it's actually experimenting with you in every way, shape, and form. It's experimenting with you in polarity and in relativity, in different superpositions. What if this happened to her? What if that happened to her? What if that happened to him? How would they be different? So there exists a multiverse of differentials for each individual. So this is to say how important every individual is, because there's no reason to have double energies. And you've seen tons of studies on twins. They're always very uniquely different because there is no twin soul. We're all one, but we're all one in a different part of our journey, having different experiences at different times. Even if I ran into an incarnation of myself at the same time, they would be very different people because they would be basing their world based on the parameters of their existence at that time, and they would be coming from their spiritual growth at that moment. And my spiritual growth in the other would be a little further behind or a little further ahead. So literally, even meeting myself, there's no quite equal. And for a while, everybody was starting to tell people in school and stuff that everybody's a unique snowflake. You're all unique. And I love that because I knew in my heart that that was right. And then everybody started making fun of that. Oh, you're not a unique snowflake. No, we are. Why does it not seem that way? Because we're not very brave. Because many of us are missing our masculine strength. And we're going to get into a bunch of that tonight so we can learn how to reclaim it. So we've got the nothing, which turns into a mind, which is now polarized because there's still the nothing and the mind. And that is the basis of everything on this planet. Everything is polarized. Hot or cold is temperature. That's one thing, but we're looking at it in two ways. Hot or cold, it can be multiple things. Love or hate, that's one thing. So that's how we feel about something, right? Our emotions. But we're talking about it in two ways. It's just a scale. And we can make this scale over and over again with pretty much everything. And it's interesting too, because if you look at like a scale, you're always trying to kind of shift it as like, all right, well, what's positive, what's negative? Interesting thing is, you can, there's this movie where there was this a silly joke and they were referencing sex as some silly word in the alien language. It was called snoo-snoo. And then later on, they were in a trial and they were like, death, by snoo snoo. And it takes this thing that you would have put on the positive scale, and then all of a sudden, oh no, too good. It's become too good. It's become so good that it's bad again. And that happens with everything. There's this sort of infinite loop where you can kind of, at what point does the hot become cold? And then, you know, when you get burnt really badly, what is it? It feels like cold. It's like, oh, it froze me. And then when you get the like frostbite, oh, it burnt, right? That's how it feels, because it polarizes. It's this little flip. And that's happening in the universe all the time. These patterns are inherent in the universe, and you'll just see them over and over and over again. So from here, if we just did like a little freeze frame as the universe is waking up, we have the beginning of our first vibration, and our first vibration is our first step out of balance. You know, there's a part of us that will always be in balance, but essentially, as long as we're out in the universe, we're kind of fundamentally imbalanced unless we're consciously doing things to balance ourselves. And this vibration, this first action, created the first relativity. There's relativity of plenty all around the universe. Essentially, you know, you go into let's go with a circle. I want to draw one. Oh, I didn't bring a pen back here. See, Michael, do you have a pen? How did I not bring my pen? Of course, it took the 7th class to forget my pen. I'm going to run and get it in 2 seconds. But for now, let me just say, say this is a circle right here. Okay, yeah, here. I drew this big circle, right? The polarity is cut down the middle, okay? So you got, oh, thank you. So you got far left and far right. And again, we talked about this, it kind of goes in a loop. So you could eventually get to the point where it's like, oh, that's bad again. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of good again. Within this circle creates a gradient. There's spots within this hub. We can go a little to the right of this side of this one thing. We can go a little to the left of this one thing, and up over here. We can show up in a number of different places. And that's basically what we're on. When we look at like a horoscope, our horoscope is just being divided amongst all the different places where we might be born, divided between 12, which you'll see is a pretty important number. And there are different little numbers that are reflected of all this. Like there's magic in the numbers, and the magic really comes from the nature of these things. How cause and effect produces sort of a third thing a lot of times. You know, when the one thing became a mind, it was nothing. But if something was observing it from the outside, you would see polarity. So like there's nothing to say that polarity was there, but polarity was immediately created. And that happens a lot, where sort of like the number of things in creation, like, oh, we added another thing, and now another thing just sort of manifested by itself. Now that concept is available and on the table. And when we have vibration and relativity, what do we have? We have the possibility of balance again. Because vibration is the first step out of balance. This is the direct reverse of that out of balance. And if we put them together, what will we get? We would get back into balance again. Wouldn't that be nice? So that's sort of the inherent struggle of the universe, in that it was sort of one perfectly balanced, nice thing. And then it was like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we tried some things? And ever since, some of the lesser pieces of the universe have been trying to get back to being more in balance, because we're a little polarized and spread all around this map, and not necessarily good at finding that balancing energy that we need, which is the gender, the balancing energy. And we're going to talk about that more today. So now these guys are really easy. You got 7, 8, 9. Perpetual transmutation of energy. I like to think of the oblivion as the energy, because it's where the mind came from. From oblivion came a mind. So it's infinite potential. So infinite potential energy meets with inspired action, which when the mind of the universe is waking up is just kind of like a computer, you know, bum, 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 bum. You know, it's just sort of things are happening. Like this is just necessary. I'm a mind now, polarity, you know. And now we get into some of these other things, and all of a sudden we've got gradient. You know, we've got this color system. And then once we get through this perpetual transmutation of energy, inspired action, which is a cause and effect, and really everything here is just a cause and effect in one way or another. They really all can be seen as such. these 9 create sort of the mainline physical shape of creation. Like when you see Kabbalah, like this is the tree of life in Kabbalah, and it goes up to 10, which is like maybe the stem that's starting the next pattern, but sort of the body of it is this pattern. It goes around the oblivion space, and it does this initial 1, 2, 3, where we've got polarity being shown. And then we get to see this larger sort of rhythm, which is cool with the polarity, because you can do this again where you go, blue and red. Blue and red is purple. Yellow and red is orange. Blue and yellow is green, etc., etc. It's all just that same bit of polarization, and there being another thing in between, there's gray. So you see these patterns over and over again, and really they exist larger than just in the numbers and in the colors. They exist within the fabric of everything we say. You know, I say, something like, even like extreme sports versus non-extreme sports, okay? There's the 2 polarized things, but then there's all these colors. Football, lacrosse, oh, those guys are in red because they're kind of the same. Oh, having a motor in it, okay, all right, I'm falling out of a plane now. You know, and they're all their own different colors within the thing. And you'll find largely groupings and stuff, they don't break these numbers to, like if you're going to fundamentals, like the fundamentals, there's only so many things. There's only so many ways the universe can think about things, just based on the fundamentals of the mind. It's polarized, and then it spreads out its thing. It can kind of like go on infinitely with minutia, but when you pull all the minutia back and get to the fundamentals of what you're looking at, you're going to find that you're getting down to something that looks like this, like 6-piece color wheel, and are all sort of pieces of the same puzzle. All right, so these 9 create that body right here, and then number 10 comes in with the rhythm, you know, that little stem that'll go on to the next one. There's a lot of rhythms created here, the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Tesla loves to talk about 3, 6, and 9. Within the beginnings of the universe, 3, 6, and 9, we'll get into this in a minute, but they're feminine numbers. They're the things that create the angles for a circle. 360 degrees is a triangle. Is a circle. And if you break down the different angles, it'll always end up being something within the realm of 9. 9, 6, or 3. Forgive me on I'm feeling like I'm saying that wrong right now, so let's just pretend I didn't say that, because I don't even remember what I said. Trying to think about 3, 6, and 9 right now and explain it correctly. They have an invisible quality to them, and it would take a little bit longer to explain, but you can kind of see in math that 3, 6, and 9 end up being sort of invisible pillars of math, where like they're holding up a space, they're holding up empty space, sort of. And it's very interesting. You really kind of have to like look at it. It's very difficult to articulate what they're doing, but they almost, I think of them as invisible numbers to a certain degree. That 3, 6, and 9 are like these magic numbers that just kind of show up by virtue of 1 and 2. The way I said, like a third perspective to see this thing is sort of created the moment there's a difference. You know, like there's one thing and there's another thing. Who knows the difference? The third man does. And that third thing being like this invisible third perspective is, you see it in the math, the way like the math stacks up. It's very interesting. And that's why so much of this is so cool, because the universal laws, the way they lay out, you can see it in math. You can see it in math, you can see it in colors. It's just a little bit more, bare bones. You're not describing it like human beings. We're describing, blocks and shapes and stuff like that. But that is the basis of everything that you're dealing with in reality. Blocks and shapes. You're a whole bunch of blocks and shapes just turned into form. And we like have a tendency to think like, oh no, I can think and I can judge all these different things. Yeah, we invented that. We invented all of this perception that we have and all of our understandings and judgments about things. They didn't have to always be. We've brought these things into our reality, and a lot of our ideas fly in the face of the real reality, which is the mind is governing everything, and it's all one, and it's following some basic patterns. So from rhythm, we get correspondence, and correspondence I like to show with the Fibonacci sequence. When you go around, essentially, you get back to a place that looks kind of like the place where you were. You're like, okay, I'm here, and I'm going around, and then eventually I'm like here. And I'm like, oh, wow, look, I'm like back where I started, kind of, except I'm in a new octave. And music works like this, where you start at the C and you end at the C. You're moving up into a new octave, or you're going down into the lower octave. So there's a similar sort of thing that's just happening perpetually with the mind of God, where it's examining itself, and then eventually it's getting up to the next level, and it's seemingly kind of passing by the last place it was. It was like, hey, I was just kind of over there a minute ago, but now I'm over here. And then eventually, again, after going through some rhythms, it's going to come around, it's going to say, hey, wait a second, I think I've been here before, but it's kind of different. It's just a little different. We're up to a new octave. So rhythm, correspondence, new octave, and then infinite compensation. The universe is inherently infinite, is bountiless, because it came from a mind, and the mind is infinite. If the mind's infinite, the universe is infinite. What comes first, the mind or the physical? The mind. So the infinite mind is capable of producing anything from it. And that's when we get to the 13th law, really the overriding law, which I like to call the law of creation. You are the grasshopper and the rock, and your God herself, his self, right? So you are projecting from your inner reality the universe around you that you are creating for yourself. Everybody is doing this, creating their own individual reality. Now that reality rubs up against everybody else's reality, but you choose whether you want to believe that person about what they said about death, or if I don't get saved by Jesus or whatever. It's all about you. If you have guilt over, oh, I haven't been saved by Christ, well, it's real for you. If you never did, then it's not a part of your world. And we are going through all of our universe, constantly projecting at others and having them project at us. And it's a matter of what we are choosing to accept that creates our universe, how big or how small it is. When children come into the world, their openness knows no bounds. They believe everything is possible until we start to say, oh, no, it's not possible. It's really the worst thing we can do as parents. As well-meaning as it might be to demonstrate to a child or anybody how one particular path has led you or other people to folly or calamity, every door you shut shuts so many more doors than you can possibly imagine. Because we don't think big. We think pretty small. And if you go in there and you start shutting one door, and then you shut another door, that door is setting shade on all the related and adjacent doors. And as you see, everything is connected. Everything is just kind of one thing. So you're like, oh, when I talk, I kind of have like a little bit of a lisp. Now all of a sudden, I can't do this job that I wanted to do yesterday. I can't ask that boy out that I wanted to ask out yesterday. I can't live the life that I wanted to live yesterday the way I wanted to live it, because I no longer have confidence in this one thing. And now I change and adjust myself so that I can comfortably live. And now forever, I've stopped myself from opening any of those doors. Done. I've made a little adjustment subconsciously. This is what I'm going to do to protect myself from this. And that's it. You're off to the races. You're locked into a new reality, a new perception. No, you can't do that. Nah, you can't be a rock star. That's, you know how many people are professional athletes? That sort of thinking will stop you from ever being a professional anything. Yes?
Not a question from them, but a question from me.
Yeah.
Until you decide to think of some other way.
Yeah, until you decide there's some other way. Recently, it's funny, I was having trouble with police. I was feeling like I was just getting pulled over occasionally for like just ridiculous things. But it became like a little bit of a thing in my vibration where I was like worried about it. And it wasn't like I was off being a criminal, but I was feeling like, they are always harassing me. And this is so aggravating. And I was trying to sort of like put it out of my mind, like similar to how I was trying to do like the mosquitoes. I'm like, no, mosquitoes don't exist, cops don't exist. Like, you know, I'm just like not thinking about them. I'm not going to think about them at all. But that wasn't it, because what I really needed was a positive crutch to change my perspective about the police. And when I met my new girlfriend, Katie, she really trusts Waze. She trusts it. The police are being pinpointed on a map by other Wazers. She trusts that if there's a cop around, somebody's going to find him, and they're going to put him on the thing, and she's going to know that the cop's there, and she's never going to get a ticket. And she doesn't. And as I was watching her have this experience, I was like, this is my problem. I'm so like, well, I mean, Waze couldn't possibly get every cop. And I'm like, I'm not accepting it as just a good excuse to feel great about driving around, and I'm not going to be harassed because I know when the police are around and, you know, no reason to pull me over. This was the medicine that was creating the world where she lives in, where she's never pulled over. She's got her little magic spell, and it's little. It's not a lot. My biggest problem in my existence is I'm so big, I have so much energy, I have so much love and passion for things, I crush them all, I just destroy them. And not the way that you would think, like of like really overbearingly getting in there and destroying them. I just care energetically. I care so much. And I can't help but be thinking about a thing a lot. You know, I'm thinking about it this way, thinking about it that way, thinking about it, worrying about it a little bit. Oh, I hope that, you know, putting a lot of heavy energy into it. And, you know, I saw something else from Katie. You know, she's somebody who's just sort of naturally very magic, naturally is adhering to so many of these rules without even knowing, being aware that she is. But we'd left her apartment, and I remember we were just walking through the street, crossing the street, and she said, yeah, you know, it's an okay apartment, but I'd really like to get a new one. And that was it. Just like shook her head and we moved on. Next day, she got a phone call from one of her best friends. There was a new apartment available, wanted to move in. She was in a new apartment 2-3 days later, right? And that was the message for me. Jesse, do you do it like that? And I was like, not even close. Not even close. I don't do it like that. I do it like this. Over and over again. So I'm sitting there, you know, really I've been like thinking about that over and over again, and I've had to like get myself to this really light place. And I've been making music for forever, and I'm a very talented songwriter, and I've had success here or there, but music has been sort of my biggest struggle. And I see so clearly now as I've come in, you know, studying, you know, universal law for the past decade. I was just sort of like, oh, I know what I did wrong. You know, I was so focused on what wasn't there, the results that I wasn't seeing. And we'll get into some of that being results oriented, which is a very masculine thing. That I was sort of like holding it in place. And meanwhile, I had all this huge success in every area that I didn't care about. I'm a very successful voiceover actor. I don't care about that. That's why I'm so successful. I just didn't care. Some people told me to do it. They were like, you got a great voice, XYZ. My dad had done voiceovers. He made money, decent money doing voiceovers, and I was a musician and a comic book writer, and both those things weren't necessarily paying my bills great. I was writing for Marvel in DC, but still you have to have a lot of comics going on in order to be generating an income from that. So the things that I love to do didn't exactly generate my income, and even though I put a lot of energy into them. And then meanwhile, audition here, audition there, and I'm booking things like crazy. I'm one of the most prolific voiceover actors in my age group and of my generation, like coming up, because I didn't care. Doesn't that suck? The things I cared about, I couldn't get. And I mean, it made me nuts. You know, I was constantly like, what is the problem here? And I thought the answer was pour more energy onto it. And I just kept add more coal and more coal. And I'm just like, this just keeps getting smaller, this fire, and this keeps getting bigger. I'm adding all the coal to this fire. What the hell is going on? But I didn't understand how adding coal worked. So in actuality, I was like picking up some coal, accidentally threw it behind me, accidentally, oh, son of a bitch. If I had known, I would have been like, I keep dropping it over my shoulder, and you're going to see how that happens in just a moment. Okay, so let's get into gender today, and maybe I'll switch over to here for a second. And if you can change up our cameras. So this was my day of making notes on gender, just to try to really give, and I spent a long time just, so you can understand these things, like, for me, it's very visceral when I come to my understanding. I'm a psychonaut. I work with different medicinal plants like psilocybin, magic mushrooms, or ayahuasca. I've done ayahuasca a dozen times. And I'll get these major downloads of information. And I mean, the past decade of my life, it's just sort of been like, teach them the hard stuff. And I kind of, every time I have one of these experiences, I'm kind of like, when do I get to like ride unicorns and like see pretty things? Because it just seems like you keep cramming textbooks into my head. They're just like, get it in there, get it in there. Big books of information. So I'll get sort of a visceral understanding of something like gender, which can be a little taboo for people when they're understanding something like gender or sexuality or something like that, because all the walls that we put up are just walls that we've put up. They're not sacrosanct, Everything is one, and like your perspective on the other one things is your perspective on the other one things. And every aspect of the universe has a unique perspective on itself, So, what do we mean by gender? We went over that. Basically, there's two available energies of the universe that create balance when brought together, and everything in creation has both of these energies, right? Gender is essentially balance in the terms of universal law, the way we're discussing it now. Just the two different things, and together being in balance. Masculine and feminine energy. What is the difference? Okay, so we're going to go over this in a lot of ways. I've got some longer lists, but this initial list that I want to break down to you are the most fundamental to try to yourself understand and interpret universal law. Okay, because that's really the whole thing here. It's simple. At the same time, it applies to everything. So it's very complex in that we're describing the totality of all in some very, very simple concepts. So in order to really come away with true knowledge here, you just have to come away with the concepts, the essential concepts of what you're looking for when you're trying to figure out, well, what would be male, what would be feminine. And again, nothing to do with having babies or anything else. This is just the two energies of the universe that exist even with no physical anything, just as energy, as thought, right? So a masculine could be described as what is, and the feminine could be described as what could be. Here it is, or where could tomorrow bring us? What could be? You could think of the masculine as outward. Here we are, practical, the moment. Because essentially, it's sort of like every moment living for forever, defending every moment, keeping the status quo versus changing the status quo. Sometimes that's a complaint in a relationship about women, where the women always want to change everything. She's constantly working on him. Well, that's the feminine nature, is to think and contemplate and sort of see and intuit. And then the masculine nature is more to sort of protect and guard what is here. Another way that it can be talked about again is external or physical, and internal, mental. Small picture versus big picture. The best description is linear versus circular or wavy. Within a flower of life are all the angles that you would want to use if you start boxing them in. You can get to all of these different angles and create big, all the masculine shapes. But the angles represent all the feminine shapes. That is feminine, and then a box or I think even a triangle would be masculine because those ones are all just angle based versus anything that has, you know, curvy. A woman is more curvy than a man. Man's more square, right? And usually. Also, we talked about this stable or foundational or changing, destructive or creative, you know, depending on the perspective. Being creative is destroying, you know, sort of, even if you say you're writing a new song, right? Your inspiration is coming from somewhere, but you kind of have to destroy that to create something new. Otherwise, you're just sort of replicating. But even if you're replicating, you're still destroying whatever the initial thing that inspired it was to do your own version, right? So within all these things, it does keep looking around, creation and destruction. Creation is something new is affecting the previous situation. All right, any questions about the sort of fundamental masculine, feminine of sort of preserving what's here, foundational nature, and then sort of turning and flowing and adjusting the feminine nature? Cool. All right, if any questions come up, Mike, tell me. All right, so two. Oh yeah, no, hey, I highly recommend them. Yes, I highly recommend them. The microdosing is been studied. I've worked with friends microdosing and had good results with them. You have no psychotropic effects whatsoever, but it helps to change your perspective and open your mind in subtle ways. I really highly recommend working with them in safe capacities. They're great teachers. I really the plants. Yeah.
Great for PTSD.
Yeah, PTSD. Yeah, ayahuasca has been. You know, somebody said I don't know if it was Nevada or somewhere. They just recently legalized all the drugs, and they were like, oh, you know, I don't like that. You know, people doing heroin on the street corner. And I said, no. I said, you're thinking about it all wrong. The wonderful thing about legalizing all the drugs is it gets rid of it going on the street corner, and it makes it much easier to access those people to help them. And even better than that, the mother of all addiction cures is the mother of all psychedelics, ayahuasca. When ayahuasca is available to be done under the right circumstances so that people can go and sit with that medicine and work with those plant spirits, they are able to get over such amazing things and depressions and sicknesses. My whole family has worked with ayahuasca to great effect. It's changed us all for the better. And that is now on the table. Positive healing modalities done with plant medicine, which has been done throughout time on this planet. But in America, we've just sort of willy-nilly blanketed everything away. But the earth is our friend, and the plants are some of our greatest teachers, and they have many, many, many wonderful lessons of perception and about the dimensions and reality to teach us. And if you go, most people too also, they tend to have these experiences when they're young. The worst experiences that you hear about are usually when people aren't told what's going on. And you are your mind, as we've gone on to. So if you're not told that you're on some mind-altering substance, you're capable of really freaking yourself out, being given no parameters whatsoever. And that's the majority of the stories that you hear where people have had bad psychedelic experiences. It's just somebody did not tell them what they were doing, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh my goodness, everything's on fire. And it can be bad. But, you know, under the right circumstances, you know, I did psilocybin by myself the first time when I was living out in California, but I spent weeks just researching and reading about it. I was 28 years old. I wanted to do it because Steve Jobs had said he wouldn't have created Apple computers if not for an LSD trip in college, and I took that to heart, and I had a lot of positive experiences with cannabis, which I had anxiety my whole life, and I didn't know about that. I was straight edge. I never drank. I never did anything until I was 28. And at 28, my brother came up to me, my like 7 years younger brother, and he was like, Jesse, I really think that you should smoke marijuana. and it was absolutely you're really tense, man. Like, I think this would be good for you. And it had actually been 7 years since my drummer had passed away, and he had convinced me right before he passed away to try I was a vocalist, so I didn't like the idea of smoking. It was a very big taboo for me. So he convinced me to have a brownie or something. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, sure, I'll try that. And then he died literally like an hour or two later after he convinced me to do this. And I didn't think about it again for 7 years. So when Cody came and said, hey, you should try this, I was like, okay, yeah. And he was like, really? He thought I was going to fight him about it. And I was like, well, my friend who I trusted, he told me to do this. So it was a real journey for me. But when I did do it, I did it by myself, and I read, just read up on it and saw that it was just a mental sort of thing, and to go in with the right attitude, and to have some water, available, and to have some things that you liked and available in case you were feeling down or whatever, some music you'd like to listen to or whatever it might be. And I just had the most wonderful experience of my life. And when I told my now ex-wife that, she was like, what about getting married? What about, which she didn't know really how I felt about when we got married. And I was very nervous and apprehensive about that, and I wasn't sure if that was really like what I should have done, but I was trying to do what was the right thing for her. But she did point out a right one, which was, what about the birth of our children? And when she said that, I said, I literally have never felt so good in my life that I could not have felt as good then when they were born. It just like wasn't there. It wasn't in the tank. I didn't realize that there was that much more gratitude to feel. I wasn't that grateful. I had become ungrateful. And psilocybin, it made me grateful in an instance. And I mean, literally, as that was my first experience of psilocybin, my second experience was righteous anger. I went, I'm so grateful. What idiot kept this from me? Who would say that gratitude was a drug, bad experience? Like, my thoughts on what this was that it was something awful, that it was weakness, and I literally just flipped my perspective, and I cared about my family more, and I appreciated their contribution to my life. I appreciated life. I realized that all of a sudden, like, years of just being disappointed in some things had made me focused on that, and in my mind the scale had tipped. But this is infinite. This is just a bunch of little crap I was complaining about. And in an instance, I had that proper balance of perspective. And that's the whole thing with gender, is bringing yourself into proper balance in terms of the way you're looking at these things. So we'll continue on talking about now thinking with your heart or thinking with your brain. What do we think is the feminine? What is it thinking with your brain? It's thinking with your heart. And the masculine is the thinking with your brain, right? So masculine energy is what? Feminine energy is what? So we'll start with masculine. And these were some things that I wrote down. And again, I go to a lot of different sources, and everybody can kind of interpret things a little bit differently. But they're all within the realm of reason. And when I come across anything that I think is like, well, I don't really see that so clearly, I tend not to include it. But if we want to think about what we would call masculine energy values, we might think about honesty or accountability, integrity, humbleness, boundaries, stability. Again, remember, we're all honoring the status quo, right? Security, being responsible, protective, confident, logical, focused, disciplined, supportive, present, inner strength, direction, clarity, courage, capable, certain, assertive, right? So these are all, I know what I like, and I like this, right? And then we have more feminine type values. Vulnerable, authentic, flowing, effortless, surrender, open, receptive, reflective, grounded, intuitive, sensitive feeling, or boundaries, being sensitive to other people's boundaries, empathic, all very similar. A lot of these are very similar, I'm sure you notice. It's this scale right here where we have the polarity, fast and slow, but there's a million things in between that all describe various degrees of fast and various degrees of slow. So within this, as we go to describe masculine, we go to describe feminine, we end up getting into just a lot of degrees of the same thing. Subtly different, but still ultimately representing a thing. And hopefully these balls of energetic sort of feeling is giving you a little bit of an impression so that you can feel out what the feminine is, what the masculine is, and what you might be struggling with as far as what your blockages are, you know, if in one of these areas or another. Also continuing compassionate, magnetic, this is all feminine, supportive, trusting, creative, unconditional love, understanding, nurturing, tenderness, kindness, stillness, radiance, surrender, grace, emotional, allowing, ease, okay? So there's a softness about the feminine energy, and then there's a firmness about the masculine energy, ultimately. Sorry, my tape fell out of my pocket. And thank you for the pen, by the way. So if we're thinking in terms of opposites, I put together a decent little list of some that kind of scale the thing. And again, some of these as you get into, there's some argument to be had. But really what we're looking for is the larger total of what, you know, is in pattern here, is what's being repeated over and over, okay? So if we go masculine, feminine, all right, you could think of logic and intuition. Or you could talk about that in like analysis and values, all right? Like analyzing a situation versus going, I care about these things, right? Action versus healing, you know, so you're out there taking action in the world versus being sort of reserved and more meditative. You'd be healing or maybe planning. Firm, gentle, or calm. Survival versus expressive, you know, so you're doing what you need to survive versus you are doing extracurricular things. This was interesting, and at first I was like, what does this mean? They said loyal and wise, and I was like, loyal and wise? How are those opposites? But they are. Loyal, loyalty to the standard. Wise, that things can always improve. You know, what's wisdom? Wisdom's always just seeing sort of the better perspective that elevates you to the next thing. So loyal to the old, that which we love and we've brought into existence and we appreciate. Wisdom to move forward because there's better ahead. And isn't it so interesting? Something like that. And the reason why I like this so much, loyalty and wisdom, because don't you love both? I love both, right? I don't want to have to pick just one. I want to be loyal and wise. So that's the beautiful thing, because sometimes some of these can look like, it's like, well, one of them's got the cards and the other one doesn't, you know. You're strong and I'm gentle, you know, like, or whatever. Or like, you know, you can go with the flow and I keep running into walls. You know, it seems kind of like, well, they got the good thing and I got the not good thing. But it's not that. Loyal is very valuable. We want loyal. Wise is equally valuable. We want both these things. So, you know, that is where you can see sort of the beautiful balance that lies in the heart of all of these genderized things. They're split, but in the middle of them lies what everybody wants. Just, you know, the regalness, the grace that comes from strength and softness. So continuing our little, you know, backwards, you know, or opposites thing. Adventurous or urgent and patient. You know, and that's interesting too, because originally I had adventurous and patient, and then urgent came up, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of the negative version of adventurous. You know, and there's always sort of you could look at either one of their things. Patient, or you could boring. You know, like you could always kind of turn the thing into the next thing, as they're all just subtly connected. Rational for the masculine versus emotional. You know, strength versus flexible. Projective versus receptive. Active, passive. Giving, contractive. Expansive, intuitive, which I know we said intuition earlier, but you know, just another way of thinking of it. Individual for the masculine versus the collective, the larger whole, the bigger picture, the smaller picture, bigger picture. And I mean, even that, works in, so think of like a masculine thinking, right? So it doesn't have to be necessarily selfish thinking, but you think about the tribe, the individual. But there's a larger tribe on the whole planet, right? Or we're just thinking about our country, nationalism, the United States, but we're a planet, there's more people, right? So thinking of the whole, you can just individualize in thinking of my religion, my people in my town. That's that individual versus the more groupthink. We could think of results-oriented versus process-oriented. Results-oriented is very masculine. Process-oriented, getting it right, doing it the right way, making sure everybody is a part of the process in the right fashion. Competitive versus collaborative. Doing versus being. Intent-focused, effect-focused. So intent is like, what you want, but effect is, well, how does it actually work out? You may have wanted things to be more orderly, but you ended up yelling at everybody, and then they all left. So the effect really doesn't help your case, buddy. Being more feminine, you'd be more, well, what's going to be the effect? How is this going to affect the other people? Versus, this is what I'm going to do to get this. Intent-oriented. Independent versus interdependent. Speaking versus listening. Directing versus open to direction. Assertive versus accommodating. Project versus respond. Conscious and subconscious. Going within to search for more, right? Structured versus random. One of the things it had said like foundational or something like that, it was like squiggles and whirls. I was like, I don't really see how that's opposite, but it is kind of a great metaphor for, in theory, the masculine is just like, all right, we got it. It's a nice, perfect square thing, and then there's like the feminine is like, nah, scribbles, like all over it. We've broken the lines. We're outside of the box. A couple more. We did head, heart, cause and effect versus polarity and relationships. So this is interesting. Cause and effect. This is cause and effect. This is relationships. This is this third perspective, seeing the relationship between these things. Cause and effect being more where we've been led to, where we are, keeping the status quo, versus having perspective on the status quo. Finally, we got linear analysis versus somebody who's doing more of a systems thinking, a bottom line oriented, dollars and cents, versus stakeholder oriented. Again, how will this actually affect everybody? Versus what's the intent, right? Intent versus effect. And then finally, differentiating and integrating. So differentiating is sort of like feeling it out, and then integrating is more absorbing it as information to be processed for the future, for new thoughts, for new creation, right? Okay. So, 4. We did talk about this already a little bit, but you can make good so good that it's bad, and you can make bad so bad that it's good again, right? Because it's an infinite loop of things, even though it is polarized. There's another way to kind of show the polarity of the system in an interesting way, because like when you look at this, if you kind of like invert this, I don't know if I have it drawn here anywhere, you could do what's called a torus, where it just kind of looks like like a ball of yarn kind of a little bit, if you had seen it like all working out. And we'd have, in the center of this, like everybody's auric field is this. In the center of this is like a tube of energy, and then it spills out to the sides, and then it comes back around to the bottom again. Kind of see how this shape would kind of be? So we got like a circle in here, and like a circle down here. And this is kind of the fundamental journey of the universe, right? The universe is one thing, and it's like this little dot in the center of here, right? And it explodes out of itself, and it separates its consciousness into all sorts of little bits. And those pieces of its consciousness get further and further and further away as they travel around, and then eventually start coming back together and reunite with itself and become one again in an infinite cycle of experiencing itself over and over again, right? So what we're talking about in that good, you know, it's like, oh, it's good, it's so good, it's the best, it's kind of the worst, oh my God, oh, it's the best, it's so good again, I love it. We go in this little loop because we're in that torus, and the torus field only kind of knows how to separate and then kind of regurgitate itself back together again. So, 5. The characteristics of the wounded masculine. Okay, so I had a wounded masculine, or still do probably on some levels. So what are the characteristics of somebody who is dealing with problems in their masculine area, energy, based on this, okay? A wounded masculine, and again, this isn't a man versus a female. My girlfriend was wounded in just these ways. This was her masculine energy that was wounded, even though, you know, and this doesn't mean she was walking around like some hill miner or something. You know, she's a lady. She just had a lot of these fundamental, honest, accountable, integrity, humble, stable, secure. She was that. I'm more vulnerable and authentic and, you know, open and receptive. That's me. That's my energy. So I need somebody who's got these other guys, right? So, but within that, if you're dealing with anybody, masculine, man or woman, who has a wounded masculine side, then they might be controlling. They might be aggressive, might be withdrawn, might be avoiding. Oh, actually, this is the wounded masculine is in me, the wounded feminine's in her. So I'm not really controlling, but I am aggressive sometimes. I get so frustrated, so frazzled. You know, as I came to understand these things, I realized that, like, oh, that's like my wounded masculine. Like, I don't feel like this strong guy that I want to be. My relationship kind of hurt my masculineness in some ways. The fact that I was injured and I had chronic pain and I had to take that to my wife and she wasn't really sympathetic made me feel very frustrated and a little aggressive, you know, because I'm not being treated like a man, you know, I'm being like treated like I'm not masculine. And that's making me want to be aggressive so I can be treated like a man, right? Withdrawn is another thing that can happen when you're wounded masculine. You withdraw because you don't feel strong. You don't feel like your strong self. You can't project your strength, so you withdraw. Or avoiding, another word for withdraw. Overly competitive, acting out, trying to, you know, get that, just muscle that victory for that feeling that you need of feeling strong and feeling masculine. Unstable, abusive, and again, that's feeling not masculine and abusing somebody else to get a feeling of your masculinity back. And a lot of people, you know, they don't realize, people just don't realize, they're just acting out. Most people aren't that conscious. So you just start being abusive, and like somebody's like, this guy's the devil himself. No, he's not the devil himself. He's wounded masculine, and there was something happened to him, and it's making him feel very weak and very small in this area, and he can't even help himself. He's become abusive because he hates himself on some small level. He's abusive internally, you know, and it's coming out to guard him. You know, these are all ways of guarding yourself when you're weak in an area, right? Dominance, similar, abusive. Perpetrator, another word for abusive, dominance. Confrontational, critical, nitpicking, controlling, and unsupportive. All right. Now, if you were a wounded feminine, like my last girlfriend, you might be insecure, needy. There was a lot of that stuff going on. You know, there's like all those little extra things that, like, you know, somebody might not think of that that you thought of. And you're like, oh, but you didn't do the thing. I didn't think of the thing. You thought of the thing. But you thought of the thing, and now you're like, I don't have the thing. That's when you're being needy. You're just creating things that you need for somebody else to fulfill. Codependent, need a relationship, need somebody. Everybody is supposed to be balancing their gender within themselves. First, you're supposed to be finding your inner happiness, and then hopefully bringing your own inner happiness into a relationship with somebody. We're not really taught to do that, so we end up running off the relationship when we haven't balanced ourselves, and we got two faulty people fighting all the time, right? Manipulative is when you have a wounded feminine energy. Inauthentic, overly emotional, playing the victim, behaving as if you're powerless, weakness, withholding love and affection, and being oversensitive. When your feminine energy is off, so many of those wonderful things about you become the not so great things about you, because you're noticing everything, because you care and you're sensitive, and all of a sudden you're using all those things that you're noticing to control and needle, and and now you're disturbing that piece using your very gifts, right? And then the same thing happens there. The man who's the gifts that are supposed to be there, or the masculine parts of the person, they're not really exactly there. Now they start using that strength to control and to dominate, because it's being put through this bad lens. But we know strength is good. It's just when it's the misuse of the strength, right? Yeah.
I guess in theory you could have wounded masculine and feminine in the same person.
Absolutely, and most people do. Though I think, and I could be wrong about this, but generally my experience, my intuition says largely when you meet somebody, they are in one camp or another. But that's not to say that there aren't plenty of people, I'm sure, who are in that neutral place, and everybody is dealing with the yin yang. Yeah, you're black with a little bit of white. You're white with a little bit of black. Everybody's got both. So you might be dealing with some of the, like I over here with the feminine, my feminine's pretty strong. I'm not codependent. I'm not really needy. I'm not manipulative at all. I'm very authentic. But I can be over emotional sometimes. I can be insecure. I can feel a little like make myself into a victim. I see that now, and it's rare, but I'll see myself do that because it's really against my nature. But because I'm insecure and I'm a little over emotional sometimes, before I know it, I've made myself into a victim, right? And I tend not to be really feel very powerless, but I feel so powerful and not in full understanding of things that I will pull my power away from myself, because I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. We're lost. And that's really just I have all the power and look what I've done with it kind of thing, which is the same thing. You get yourself to a power, even being powerful, and then you're like, but I'm lost anyway, right? Withholding, that's not something that I do, but oversensitive into that same thing, over emotional, victim, insecure. So that's my little white dot in my black sea of really being a little aggressive, being withdrawn, avoiding, a little unstable, a little confrontational, critical. Most of these things I do to me. It's just me doing that stuff to myself. But then if I'm in a corner, my family, trying to work things out with them, they would accuse me all the time of being really aggressive, being very confrontational. I'd be sitting there freaking out, really, which was really the thing was I was unstable, because I didn't know how to handle these things. Because I love honesty and accountability, integrity. I'm those things. And this unstable part of me, not being able to keep myself in line, I would go off the handle, and I would be a little confrontational, and I would be a little aggressive, and I would be tried to dominate them within that moment, I'm just trying to protect myself. So you got to look at all these things on both sides, because you will have imbalances on either side. All right, cool. We're getting to the end of class here. I just got 2 more main things to chat about. What time is it, Mr. Michelson? 8:46, perfect. Okay, cool. So, healing your dual-gendered nature, reclaiming our strength in fullness. When I used to complain more about religion, I would complain that so much of religion teaches us how to be the lamb, and they don't teach us how to be the lion. And a lot of what I have come to with the idea of taking one's power back is that it's very absolute. And that to me, the eye of the tiger means that we're not following rules perpetually that have been cast upon us, but we are powerful, deadly, creative beings who are choosing in every moment how we react and respond. When you're told, thou shalt not kill, and you're like, oh, okay, we don't kill. Okay, we don't kill. You lose sight of, you can. You have the power to try to kill me. You could. You are strong enough that you could use your body, use your muscles to dominate me. You could. That is power right there. It's power to know that. And it's power to not use that power against other people. To disarm yourself completely and throw out the window that you're a powerful being, a very powerful being, is to stop being a powerful being. And we are playing by our rules based on our understanding that we're one with everybody else, and it only makes sense to be as agreeable and righteous to one another as we possibly can. But within that, we are all powerful creators and decreators. And we can do whatever we choose to do. And it is in this honorable choices that we perpetually make that really the fabric of the universe is based upon. So it's honoring the choices positively to know that you're powerful and act on those powerful feelings in only the best ways. I'm powerful. I could kill you. Instead, I'm going to hug you. I'm going to make you some cookies. We're going to have a great time. I could be doing all this other stuff. I'm so powerful and capable of it, but that's not what I'm about. I'm about this. We can't be afraid of our own power, and we have to reconnect all the way up to the line of all these things, and that is when we'll fully get back our balance. There's a lot of things that I'd like to say in addition to this, in terms of the language. We are constantly putting our power in the language. How much power is on Monday? Oh, it's Monday. How you feeling? Oh, I thought it's Wednesday. Oh, it's Friday. Saturday. Sunday. It's my birthday. It's Christmas. It's my honeymoon. It's my wedding day. Why can't every day be Christmas? Why can't every day be your birthday? Because you've put all the power in those days. And you can hear it in how you talk about it. The power is in the words once we put it there. We have to consciously understand that we are giving our power away to the entirety of the language by not consciously realizing that every word is just a representation of a feeling. And the feelings are being dictated by us, how we feel about the things. And you know, a word like fuck is such a wonderful example, because people love that word because you can use it so many different ways. You can be hateful and you can be happy. Fucking A, man. Ah, it's awesome. Fuck, I can't believe it. Right? I fucking love you. You know, it can be a purely joyful word, you know, and it's funny because when you hear it like that, it's like, why aren't we allowed to say that word? No big deal, you know? But it's the other way that it was used for so long that kept people from, feeling that thing. But every word can translate, can become a balanced version of itself, because every word is just representing polarized ideas. Every word represents a polarized idea. So if I said hot and I meant cold, oh, don't go in there, it's really hot. You mean cold? You could tell that that's what I meant. The energy of the delivery of the thing is so much more important. And our language has really kind of gotten off the beaten path by disconnecting us from what we really mean so often. And so often what we really mean is like, now I'm experiencing something positive. But the language gives us so many options. We could talk about now as if it's already happened. We could talk about now as if it's going to happen. We could talk about now in various degrees of how good it is, as opposed to it just being infinitely good inherently. All of these things would be sort of just inherent if the language wasn't sort of giving us other options. Well, I don't know. What do you think? It's a B plus or an A? I thought they were all A's. No. Some things are A's, some things are B pluses, some things are C's. Now we're scaling everything, right? Judging it and evaluating it, being very masculine. and the feminine's like, no, for the future, because that's the non-judgmental thing versus like the measuring thing, masculine, non-judgmental, female. All right. So that's just some good things to know about language and energy and reclaiming your strength. And really, most of the people in this world are deficient in their masculine. And a lot of the people who have the masculine are running off with the leadership of the country, of like the whole world. And we don't necessarily want the people who got to masculine energy first, because some of the masculine energy, it's not great when it's out of balance. And we've been in a planet that's out of balance. So it's really not good for the group to have masculine, out of balance people, because they're very individual oriented. That's why we really need an energetic shift to the more sort of feminine thinking of the group thinking and coming together of those things. But of course, we need the strength to execute that change. We need the strength to move to these new places. And all that stuff will come as we get into balance. So I said, full power. Okay, so finally, we're just going to talk about gender in the laws of attraction, with the laws of attraction. How imbalance might impede your progress. And essentially, it gets down to, strength and softness. You need to be able to, all right, let's say it's like this. If we have I don't know if that's necessarily the best example. If I had like a spinning wheel, right? The feminine is like the bending reed that bends as every metal bar comes around, and then eventually slows down the wheel to the one it wants. Granted, we're spinning it and it's random, but it's not random for the universe. The universe has a certain amount of math that's going into that force, and it gets spun around, and eventually the one it wants, boom. There we go. That is sort of the ability to be flowing. And as opportunity comes, you're not strong-arming everything and going, let me in there, let me in there, let me in there. You're going, let it go, 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 let it go. That's the one, okay? To have a softness in your selection. So if you're too strong, you're going to muscle pass, overload, or essentially miss the subtle signs that the universe may be sending you over time. And within a more reflective and receptive place, you'll be able to interpret those messages and make the proper action, select the right thing. On the on the male side of things, the strength. Let's see what we're talking about: being more flowing versus being strong. If you're It's so funny, just talking about the same thing for the same thing. There's no, I keep wanting to just explain it the same way. I'm like, I already said it that way. This is the last sentence of the class, Jesse. Don't break down now. So if you are, I'm just going to start again from this little bit. So if you're wounded feminine, we're talking about being insecure. Oh man, my brain is just like sort of like fried. I apologize. So if you're not being strong enough, you're not going to take the action required to get yourself where you want to be. But at the same time, not every action should be taken. So if you're overly masculine, you're just going to end up taking every single action that comes in, which is what I kind of always did. Even though I was a more feminine person, like my action forever, I was just action, 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 but not the right action. I wasn't allowing the opportunities to arise and go, okay, here it is. And that's really the thing for attraction to take place. You need to allow yourself to line up with what you want and the universe to line up with you, and to be able to tell the difference when it gets there. Okay? And that concludes the class tonight. Gender is a fun one. Lots of back and forth. Next week I'm going to be doing perpetual transmutation of energy. And of course, going over all of this again in a couple other ways. I'll probably introduce a couple other cool concepts, and we'll talk about some science stuff, probably some quantum mechanics and some quantum theory and quantum physics and things like that support so much of this, because I haven't talked about a lot of those things yet. And that's it. I hope you guys really enjoyed me at home. And do I have any questions or anything before I go tonight? No? Awesome. And anything over there? Awesome. You guys are great. Thank you guys for joining me every week. I really appreciate it. And I hope you'll join me next Monday. See you later.